Hey folks, I want to welcome you to the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network's International Holocaust Remembrance Day event. We're going to continue to wait for people to join us. And as we do that, we're going to listen to a song and watch a short video. We'll start the webinar in about, I think the video is about 2.5 minutes long. So we'll be right back with you after that video starts.
Never say that you have reached the very end, when leaden skies a bitter future may portend. For sure the hour for which we yearn will yet arrive, and our marching steps will thunder we survive. For sure the hour for which we yearn will yet arrive, and our marching steps will thunder we survive. Not lead but blood inscribed this bitter song we sing. It's not a caroling of birds upon the wing, but 'twas a people midst the crashing fires of hell that sang this song and fought courageous till it fell. But 'twas a people midst the crashing fires of hell that sang this song and fought courageous till it fell. Zog niet geen molas, du geets dem letzten Weg. Gods himlen bleiene verstellen gloriete. Komen werd nog ons heroes gewenkte Stadt. Ze wird apoikt ons, trok mir seinen Gott. Komen werd nog ons heroes gewenkte Stadt. Ze wird apoikt ons, trok mir seinen Gott. Ze wird die morgens unbegilden uns dem Heim. Und der Nächten wird verschwinden mit dem Feind. Nur euch versammeln wird die Sonne in dem Kajor. Wie a Parol soll gehen das Lied von Dor zu Dor. Nur euch versammeln wird die Sonne in dem Kajor. Wie a Parol soll gehen das Lied von Dor zu Dor. Das Lied geschrieben ist mit Blut und nicht mit Blei. Sie ist mit kein Liedl von a Vogel auf der Frei. Das Futter Volk zwischen Fallen nicht gewinnt. Das Lied gesungen mit Nackanes in die Erde. Das Futter Volk zwischen Fallen nicht gewinnt. Das Lied gesungen mit Nackanes in die Erde.
Hi, folks, and welcome again to the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network's International Holocaust Remembrance webinar. We are very happy to have you here. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Jesse Strauss. I am a host and producer at KPFA and Pacifica Radio, as well as a member of the U.S. chapter of the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, and I am deeply honored to be here as one of our co-moderators, along with David, who you just saw from our Argentina chapter of IJAN. I want to welcome you all to this International Holocaust Remembrance Day webinar. It's hosted by 4 chapters of IJAN from the US, from Argentina, from the UK, and from Spain. Um, we started out with that song. That song is called Zognit Kainmol. It was written by a Jewish prisoner at the Vilna Ghetto in 1943, and it was inspired by the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. That song became a symbol of resistance against Nazi Germany's persecution of Jews during the Holocaust. And there's one line from that song that I want to highlight and uphold, lift up in today's event, which is from generation to generation, let us sing this song. Um, and that's a call for certainly resistance to fascism, resistance to genocide, and it's a call that we do not accept those conditions. Never again for anyone. Again, that line is from generation to generation, let us sing this song. I want to start by lifting up the names of a few ancestors. First, my grandfather, Avram Shidlavsky. Um, in the late 1930s in Poland, he had a wife and 2 daughters who were age 11 and 14 at the onset of the Nazi Holocaust. And his wife and 2 daughters were killed soon after the Holocaust started. Um, I want to lift up the name of my grandmother, Maria Weinreb Szydlowski, who survived the Holocaust in Poland only because she was offered the ultimate solidarity. She was hidden in a Catholic hospital by a Catholic nun just outside the Warsaw Ghetto for many years. And I also want to lift up my mother, Lily Shidlovsky, who I believe is here. Hi, Mom. Um, Lily, my mother was born immediately after the Nazi Holocaust in Europe and came to the US with her parents, my grandparents, when she was a year and a half old as a refugee. I grew up with stories of the Holocaust, of surviving that genocide, and I continue to learn ways that survival has impacted my family's life, and in many moments has defined aspects of my own life. Um, Before I get deeper into it, I also want to lift up the name of an ancestor of the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, Hajo Meyer. Hajo was a survivor of the Auschwitz concentration camp, and he became the inspiration for and a participant in IJAN's Never Again for Anyone campaign, which was started in 2010 after Israel's 2009 bombardments on Gaza. We'll hear more about Hayo later and also more from him in a video clip. As I lift up my own ancestors' names as well as Hayo's, I'm reminded of the line from the song that we started with, from generation to generation, let us sing this song. And that is what we're coming with today as an intention. We are gathered here today on International Holocaust Remembrance Day to say never again for anyone. A quick note on what the history of this day is. International Holocaust Remembrance Day is a United Nations holiday that is commemorated every year on January 27th, which is the anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz concentration camp. That was January 27th, 1945. Um, it's specific and intentional for us that this is the United Nations recognition of Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is distinct from Israel's Day of Remembrance, which happens in May. Zionists capitalize off of this Day of Remembrance, but for us, it's important to make that distinction because it's part of claiming our history in a way that is not based in policy built to support the state of Israel. Zionists have been waging a campaign at every level saying that people who are against Israel are anti-Semitic. They conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Our existence as anti-Zionist Jews rejects that narrative. And while Israel uses the Nazi Holocaust, which of course is the devastating story of my family, to justify the need for Israel as a Jewish supremacist apartheid state that relies on the subjugation of the Palestinian people. So we're here, the framing of this conversation from the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network is that we cannot and will not stand for the weaponization of our genocide to justify the subjugation of another people or the genocide of another people. And of course, we're lifting up the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine. I have to acknowledge that tragically today marks the 113th terrifying and painful day of Israel's genocide in Gaza. So thank you for bearing with me while we do some framing. We're going to spend the next hour and a half or so together in conversation with anti-Zionist and internationalist comrades from around the world. And I'm really honored to be in this space with them and with all of you who are out there in the webinar world who I can't see. The folks joining us who are going to be our guests in just a few minutes: Phethani Madzivhandila, Monadel, Herzallah, Sara Kershnar, Kali Akuno, Maria LaHood, Sam Weinstein. I rattled those names off very quickly, but we will learn a lot more about those people in the very near future. Our format today will be introductions, then we'll go to our panel, then to guest commentators, and then we'll bring in questions from you. Feel free to put questions in the Q&A section throughout, and we're going to get to as many questions from you as possible. Before we go to our panel, I'm going to pass it off to my co-moderator, David Comedi, who is here with the Argentinian chapter of the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network.
Thank you, Jesse. Yes, I am David Comedi, or David Comedi, as they call me in Argentina. First of all, I would like to remind in Spanish again, las personas que no entienden inglés pueden cliquear abajo Interpretation y de ahí Spanish, y así podrán tener traducción simultánea al castellano y al español. Framing this event again, I'm David Comedi. I have been IJAN's spokesman in Argentina since 2009. And in this occasion, when we are commemorating the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, when all genocide must be condemned and also prevented, I would like to tell you a little bit about the genocides that were conducted in my country, Argentina, not only against the native peoples during the 19th and 20th century, but also during the military junta rule during the 1970s and 80s, when a systematic plan of elimination of a specific part of our society was carefully executed by the military junta, which constitutes a genocide according to its general definition. That is, quote, the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular group with the aim of destroying that group, either for ethnic, national, religious, or political reasons. Indeed, the Argentinian military often used racist tropes against its victims, particularly against Jews, while they were receiving political, intelligence support and arms from the US, and especially from its close ally, Israel, as it is well known that Israel fulfills a crucial role in worldwide repression and state terrorism. Here in Argentina, every March 24, the day when the junta took power in 1976, we also say never again, especially in these days that we have a crypto-fascist president who, no wonder, is strong admirer and supporter of Israel and its stubborn He is a stubborn genocide denier. So let me introduce the purpose of this event. We do it under two mottos. The first one is never again for anyone. It's not just never again, as Zionists claim for Jews or for the Nazi genocide, but anyone. And in that sense, we will go to the second motto, which is exceptionalize the Nazi genocide. As we all know, Zionists are weaponizing the Nazi genocide to oppress a people by colonizing their land, confiscating their natural resources, destroying their houses, schools, universities, and other civilian infrastructures, denying the right for freedom and self-determination, while conducting mass incarcerations, torture, sexual and other kinds of abuses, and mass killing of children, women, elderly, and men, procedures that have been defined by various scholars as textbook genocide against Palestinians. Genocide is a crime under international law and must be condemned and punished, not only the Israeli perpetrators, but also their accomplices and mentors from the US, Germany, UK, France, and other countries. Surviving genocide leaves trauma, and this will likely last many generations, but nothing justifies weaponizing such a trauma against others by waging another genocide. As Jews, we oppose the use of Jewish suffering to cover up for genocide and other crimes against Palestinians. To be clear, the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, IJAN, is against Israel as a Jewish ethno-religious state, since it is a settler colonial enterprise inspired in previous colonial genocidal regimes, and as such, it is not surprising it is currently committing genocide against the native people of Palestine. So on this date, when the world commemorates the International Holocaust Day, by making a call against racism and genocide against anyone, we condemn the current Israel's Zionist genocide and call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire on Gaza. We also talk about the importance of internationalism towards collective liberation of oppressed people who resist racism, fascism, colonialism, and other patterns of oppression. For that reason, we are working with international comrades today to articulate together shared commitment to stopping this ongoing genocide and with whatever means possible. We'll be highlighting South Africa's court case against Israel's genocide, as well as a United States-based case against that country's support for Israel's genocide. I give the word to Jesse, who will introduce the first panelist of today. Jesse, please, you have the word.
Yeah, thank you so much, David, for continuing to frame the conversation. We're going to begin by handing over the mic. As David mentioned, just this week, we've seen Israel challenged in both international and U.S. federal courts. That doesn't mean that we necessarily look to courts for justice, but I think it says something about the historic moment that we are in, where Israel's violence, settler colonialism, and dehumanization of Palestinians is in every facet of our public conversation. So one of the court cases I mentioned just saw its first hearing yesterday here in Oakland, California, and our first panelist is one of the plaintiffs in that case. Monadel Herzallah is a Palestinian with the U.S. Palestinian Community Network and a plaintiff in the Defense for Children International Palestine versus Biden court case. Welcome, Monadel.
Thank you, Jesse, and salam to everyone. My name is Monadel Herzallah, I'm a member of the National Coordinating Committee of U.S. Palestinian Community Network. And I have noticed in the flyer that was my title is one of the plaintiff against the President of the United States, and I'm honored to be listed as such. We are charging the government of the United States, represented by the President, Secretary of State, and Secretary of Defense. Their charges, they have failed to prevent the genocide from taking place. They are complicit with the genocide that's taking place as we speak, and they are failing to prevent this horrible madness and this genocide that's taken place for the last 113 days. I wanted to thank you for including me in this program, for the fact that we are extremely pleased and honored that we have worked with IJAN for the last few years, many years, related to back in the early 2000, and we know the cadres that worked with them in the different, even before IJAN has started. I wanted to also recognize our brothers and sisters in Argentina and in the UK and in Spain who are listening to us, or they will listen to us. We see you, we hear you, we respect you, and we are fighting the same fight. The fact that we are talking about Zionism is not only a racist ideology. It is fighting against Zionism will unite us to fight against a white supremacist ideology, oppression ideology, settler colonial ideology, and even anti-Semitic ideology. Don't let them even mislead us or mislead the public by really weaponizing themselves with the suffering of the Jewish in the Holocaust. As I came, yesterday, this timing is brilliant for the organizers to do it after the ICJ decision and the first hearing in our case in Oakland, California. The only thing that I think it's really important to highlight the fact that during the court yesterday, first of all, the government has failed to present anything of that powerful as our plaintiffs who testify in front of the judge. And second, what's really out of the ordinary, and that will give us a lot to think about, is the fact that they did not, we were prepared for cross-examination, of the government objecting to any of the facts that we were talking, but they didn't do that. However, the only one that they rejected and wanted to not to hear him at all is our expert in genocide, who is expert in the Holocaust, who has facts, who is extremely qualified, extremely credible, Barry Trachtenberg. They tried their best to discredit him. They don't want him to hear any of the facts, any of the connection of the suffering of the Jewish people in the Holocaust, and bring facts and analysis of what's going on right now. What does that tell us? It tells us that not only the settler colonial state of Israel is using the suffering of the people of the Holocaust, but rather the United States and all their allies using this thing against us and against our case. And for this, and I think that we are entering a new era that we should all unite around this, and the fact that ending the genocide, and when we say, as mentioned earlier, when we say never again, it's never again for anyone. Thank you.
I would like to present our next speaker, who is from South Africa. His name is Phethani Madzivhandila from the Walter Rodney Library in Azania, South Africa, who will be discussing the South African International Court of Justice case, as well as the internationalism of struggle against genocide and apartheid. Phethani, you have 5 minutes, please. We are all ears to your presentation.
Thank you, David, for the short introduction. As David said, I'm Phethani, based in South Africa, and we are just reeling from celebrating the verdict which was handed yesterday from the ICJ, and really the question has always been about the importance of justice and the kind of solidarity that we received during our struggle, our very long struggle during apartheid. And that was a struggle that was not easy to fight, both within the country and also with our international allies. And it is also important historically, as a country that has that emerged out of settler colonialism and went through the passage of apartheid and post-democracy where we are in South Africa today. It is quite important to speak about these things, and also importantly to be a voice of reason in the midst of the genocide that is happening, that has been happening actually for the past 25 years in occupied Palestine, and condemnation without any fear or doubt the settler regime of Israel. And importantly, one to be able to understand the fact that the weaponization of the history of the Holocaust by the current Israeli state actually diminishes, or also is an insult to the memory of the people that were killed during the Holocaust. And it is important for us as South Africa, a country that emerged out of a very difficult history, to be unequivocal about our solidarity, and also our actions itself by dragging Israel to court in the past month shows our commitment to international solidarity and the struggle for humanity, and also the struggle for human rights. So we have been watching since the 7th of October the utter disregard of the humanity and the lives of Palestinian people, and especially the merciless killing of Palestinian children, just shows you how the level of fascism and the level of of confidence that the settler state of Israel has, due to the fact that they are backed by powerful allies such as the United States of America. So it is important for us to be on this day in the remembrance of Holocaust, to be able to understand that those who were previously oppressed and also killed during the Holocaust, they have no rights, especially currently the ones who are pushing the Zionist ideology of Israel, to weaponize that history, to use it as a tool to continue to perpetuate violence and killing of other people. So also looking at the history broadly of our struggle, not only in South Africa but in the continent, we have received a lot of solidarity from international actors during our struggle against colonialism. So it is right by what we're doing, and also justifiable in terms of, or expected in terms of the international solidarity that we should show with the peoples of Palestine, who still continue to live under settler colonialism 75 years later. So importantly, the outcome of the ICJ ruling yesterday is important to show that the arc of morality is long, but also it bends towards justice, and that is the justice that the people of Palestine are supposed to receive. Whether it's 75 years later, 10 years later or so, but it is important that justice is received and justice and the occupation is ended in Palestine, and especially with a specific focus currently on Gaza, which is which has been happening for the past for the past 25 years, but in the past 3 months or so, we have seen first time a genocide that has been recorded live on our social media, and also the state of Palestine, actually the illegal state of Palestine, or of Israel, the illegal state of Israel, presently going to the media to state their intentions and what they want to do, and utter ultimate genocide and removal of the Palestine people out of their ancestral land. So this is important for us to be able to remember the importance of solidarity, and especially left solidarity across the world, and also importantly, thinking about ways in which we can intensify the struggles that or the protests that we've been doing across globally in light of this verdict which came yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phethani. We're really grateful to have you here. I'm going to move it right along and introduce Sara Kershnar, who is a co-founder of the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, an incredible organizer who is also here, like me, in the Bay Area in California.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today on the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. As Jesse mentioned, I'm a co-founder of the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, and before that, as Monadel mentioned, organized with Jews for a Free Palestine in the Bay Area, which informed our work. And you know, my own family history is one in which my family fled persecution and ethnic cleansing in Russia, and then some perished that did not previously flee Eastern Europe. And my family also comes from Spain and was displaced during the Inquisition, and then went to Eastern and Western Europe, and then those who didn't leave perished in the Nazi genocide. And so that is a history that we stand in as we organize against what the state of Israel claims to be doing in the name of Jewish people and Jewish safety, and that we stand in when we combat Zionism, which we believe is really a continuation of our own history of anti-Semitism and not a divergence from it, in addition to being, as other people spoke to, a continuation of Europe's history of colonization. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about my relationship to the Nazi genocide through my family's history, not only as Jewish, but also as coming from a father who was gay and who was criminalized and targeted by the state for being a gay man, and ultimately died of HIV, and in that process experienced a lot of dehumanization and discrimination. As a queer woman, as someone whose partner is transmasculine, and as someone who has a disabled sister who lives with me, and to remember that the Nazi genocide not only targeted Jewish people, but many people. And one of our roles as the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network has been to de-exceptionalize the privileging of Jewish experience and the invisibilizing of the many people who were targeted by not only the Nazi genocide, but the many histories of genocide that we are interested in being in joint struggle against, both historic and current genocides, rather than separated from in the ways that Israel and Zionism choose to exceptionalize. Of course, our work is largely in relationship to the Palestinian genocide, is to de-weaponize and delegitimize the attempt to use our history of persecution, ethnic cleansing, and genocide against the Palestinians and to justify not only the current genocide, but the historic ethnic cleansing, the historic siege on Gaza, and the long history of the colonization of Palestine. In addition, we challenge the role that Israel plays more broadly in repression of diverse ethnic groups, in attacking people's liberation movements. David spoke a little bit about that in terms of the junta and Israel's role in actually collaborating with the junta, and rather than stopping and calling out the genocide in Argentina and political repression, Israel collaborated and offered and tried to negotiate with the junta to allow Jews to leave only if they would go to Israel. In addition, as we heard about South Africa and the importance of that struggle and the Pan-African struggle against colonialism, Israel played and continues to play a very large role, first in arming and collaborating with apartheid South Africa. Of course, Israel was founded at the same time that apartheid South African system was established, with more depth after a long colonial history, and continues today to arm different sides of conflict and profits off of the arms and repression that it provides to regimes all over the world. So as Jewish people, we see our role as intervening in the weaponizing of our own history to justify the genocide of Palestinians, but also to intervene in the multiple ways that Israel works with countries like the United States all over Europe to advance repression and to target people based on race, gender, ethnicity, disability, immigration status, etc. And in closing, I just wanted to, in closing of the opening, I wanted to introduce Hajo Meyer. And in 2010, the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network worked with the American Muslims for Palestine in bringing a tour called Never Again for Anyone to, I think, 13 countries and cities across Europe, and then a year later to cities across the United States and Canada. And really what that was about was, again, taking away this weapon and lifting up the misuse of that history. And as you will hear from Hajo, who I'll say a little bit about in a minute, one of the things for us that is so important, first and foremost, of course, to intervene in the genocide against Palestinians and its justification, is that that misuse diminishes the actual brutality of the history of the genocide of Jewish people. And for all of us, that minimization and misuse is dangerous. And so Hajo was born in Germany, and at 14, his family supported him in fleeing the Nazi genocide. His parents both perished. His brother survived, and they were reunited after. He fled to Amsterdam, where Hajo joined the resistance. There was an infiltrator in the underground resistance, and he ended up in Auschwitz, where he survived for 10 years. And so we launched this campaign on this day in 2010 against the then siege on Gaza by Israel, and it is still, unfortunately, relevant today. But as you will hear, Hajo is a real inspiration in the clarity with which he demands that he and other Jewish people are able to reclaim that, and that that history belongs to Palestine. And the last thing that I'll say about Hajo is that he was part of the resistance, and the song that we opened with is a song of resistance. And IJAN supports the right to resist and recognizes that any people who are exploited and oppressed by a power, a fascist power, have a right to resist that power. And so now we're going to turn it over to Hajo. Thank you.
I don't know how you are aware of what Judaism was before the Second World War, but I can tell you that in Europe, hardly any of the victims in Central Europe had any sympathy for Zionism.
Yeah.
But what is more important, Zionism had no sympathy whatsoever for the victims during and after the Holocaust. The founder of the so-called democratic Jewish state, I come back to that too, used literally the words, these people who come from the camps are useless human material. And here I stand a useless human material and tell you what the truth is. So the victims were Jews and not Zionists. Zionism, in fact, is the antipode of Judaism. It is true, both isms, which are of different nature, one is the creed, Judaism, and the other, Zionism, is an eschatological ideology, like Stalinism, like Nazism. Because it is an eschatological ideology where the bliss, an eschatology is expecting a blissed state in the future, and the future will come when the enemy who prevents the blissed state will be radically eliminated. So it's true, both these, so Judaism and Zionism, have certain roots, have roots in the Old Testament, in the Torah, but they are completely different nature. Pre-World War Judaism was humanitarian, universalist. All humans in that Judaism were fully equivalent. Now, political Zionism is xenophobic, nationalistic, colonialist, racist, and I must say that I must just in a second explain what is political Zionism. Like all, or nearly all, I think in all important ideologies, begin multifaceted. But then they degenerate into, as I said, Stalinism, Nazism, Zionism. And that they have very simple goals. And for the political Zionism, as it exists at latest since 1948, but it's longer in that way, but then it has become manifest, completely manifest for everybody who watched it regularly, as one single monolithic goal, a maximum of area in the old Palestine with a minimum of Palestinians on it.
So thank you all. That was Hajo actually speaking in London at the Parliament building, which UK IJAN organized, and you'll hear from them later. That later came back by Zionists in an attempt to ultimately successfully remove Jeremy Corbyn from his Labour Party seat. And unfortunately, Jeremy Corbyn, rather than standing up to them, conceded to them. But that's for another day. But I did want to mention that on this tour, every time Hajo spoke, he spoke with Palestinian speakers, but also with speakers whose ancestors had faced genocide and or speakers who today face genocide, like Kali, who you'll hear from, spoke with others on a panel around the targeting of African Americans in the United States historically and today. So I just wanted to frame that, and I'll pass it back to you, Jesse.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sara. it's wonderful to lift up our ancestor, Hajo. And thank you to all of our panelists. I want to invite our panelists to turn your video and audio on. We're going to bring up a conversation for just a few minutes, and then we're going to bring in our additional commentary from our additional guests. In the meantime, I also want to remind our audience that we would love for you to add questions in the question and answer section below. We're going to get to our public questions in a little while after some more of this conversation. And I also want to bring David into my co-moderator, David from IJAN Argentina in.
Yeah, I'm here, Jesse.
Great.
Oh.
And I think we're ready to pose this question. And so the question that we're going to ask our panelists to respond to, and you already did touch on some of these points, so feel free to respond as you wish and also be in conversation with each other as well as myself and David. But the question is, from your various vantage points and your various experiences, how does Israel's weaponization of the Holocaust impact you and your communities? And I'm going to turn it over to you all, whoever wants to jump in and speak first. Oh, and Phethani, if we can, if you're able to turn your video on, we would love to see you as well. Go for it, Monadel.
Okay. Do you hear? Okay. For me as a Palestinian, and it's been really experiencing that throughout all my organizing and all of my political activities, the fact that as being a victim for settler colonialism, and the fact that they are utilizing the suffering of the people in the Holocaust and claim it as if they are the only representative of the Jewish people. For us, it seems like they are very powerful in terms of like weaponizing themselves with the power that they have, particularly in the United States, and they will put you in a defense. You are a victim, but they point their finger at you as defending the terrorists. So basically, and that has been effective for a long time. And the reason for that is all mainstream media, all politicians who are being supported by the Zionists adapt to the talking points of these Zionists and making the victim feeling guilty about criticizing the occupier. Oh, so that was extremely hurtful when you're being dehumanized as Palestinians, and that's really hurtful. In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, the U.S. government is also using this and using this in terms of all their strategy around the world, particularly in the Middle East. So they're talking about normalizing with these dictators require that recognizing the state of Israel as the one that represent the suffering of the Jewish people in there. So the capitalist system and the imperialism domination in the region and around the world are continuing to use this. Now I'm saying that are continuing to do this, that we have a job to do in exposing these fabrication of narratives and hear more of Jewish progressive anti-Zionist authentic narrative, because when we as Palestinians we only have our narratives, as Jesse said, and I appreciate the fact that you highlight your grandfather, and that's how I learned about the history of the Nakba and the Palestinians are from our authentic history, and they cannot fabricate these narratives, no matter how much money, billions of dollars doing, spending for PR and for funding all these dictators who has no relationship with the human. It's very telling, the fact that the ICJ, the country that took Israel to court, is not Arabic country. It's not an Arab country. It's not a Muslim country. It's a country that has experienced this apartheid, experienced this exploitation, experienced this racism, all these things, and we feel extremely close to the people of and the government of South Africa, much more closer than all these puppets, all these things who have not done nothing, as the Palestinians are suffering every single day. So I think that we have a grand job to do, all of us collectively, as a people who have a task of really creating a new world. We remind ourselves always that in 1991, George Bush, the father, has pressured the UN, of course, to reverse the UN resolution that the internationally agreed on about Zionism is a form of racism. The whole world were doing that. Now, he reversed that in 1991. And after that, we never seen peace, for the last 30 years. Oslo Agreement and all these things, and the war against Iraq. But it's telling that Zionism does not only represent a challenge to only the Palestinian people, but rather that it is a unifying a platform to unite against defeating this ideology for everybody, not only for anti-Zionist Jews or Palestinians or progressives in Argentina and Brazil and in El Salvador, everywhere, that we have to do that. So we are seeing this, and we know that there is a lot that we can do. I mentioned in the example in the courtroom that why is it the government, they don't want to hear the facts, they don't want to know that the roots of the injustice, and why we are against genocide, and why you cannot use the horror and the exploitation of the issue of the victims of the Holocaust to the side of injustice, like you are doing right now to the Palestinian people.
Great.
Thank you,
Phethani.
Monadel. I think it's very clear what you're saying. And that brings me to another question, which I would like to direct to our South African representation. How was the process that brought South Africa to decide to confront global power and then put this case in the court, in the ICJ? And we have seen that for many years, Israel has been defined by many leading human rights organizations as an apartheid regime. And we haven't seen during these years any legal measures against Israel concerning apartheid. So that would be my question. How, because for many years we had an apartheid system that is being recognized by many leading organizations, and no legal measure was taken by South Africa, who have suffered apartheid for many years. But when we have genocide, then we have this terrific, very important court case, which is, I believe, as Monadel just said, is changing the world order, or at least has a potential to change the world order, where the global South is confronting the global North and the power of the global North, who has this colonial past, and not only past, but the neo-colonialism, which is imposing war and genocide in many places, and especially in Palestine at the moment. So that would be my question to you. Could you give us a light on that, please?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's very important to juxtapose this history with one of the most important events in the establishment of Israel as a state. Because you will remember that when Israel was established as a state in 1948, apartheid just began in South Africa, right? And you have to remember who was the prime minister of the then Union of South Africa at the time. Was the prime minister between 1919 to 1924, and also again from 1939 to 1948, and none other except for Jan Smuts. And interestingly enough, in northern Israel, which is occupied Palestine today, there is a city called Kiryat Ramat Yohanan. If I'm pronouncing
Looks like we have some connectivity issues. We're hoping Phethani joins back at any moment. I think maybe we should use this pause. Oh, it looks like Phethani is back. Phethani, we lost you for a moment after you referenced the name of that town.
Oh, okay. So I was saying that the town Kiryat Ramat Yohanan.
I'm going to invite Sara to jump in while we work on Phethani's internet issues.
Okay, hopefully you'll be able to join us soon. I wanted to respond both to some of the questions. There's the Nazi genocide. So there was one question about whether the term the Holocaust, and we tend to use the term the Nazi genocide because there have been many Holocausts, particularly, for instance, in the United States, the Holocaust against Indigenous people, the Holocaust against Africans. There's been many Holocausts, just to get to that question. But the weaponization of the Nazi genocide by Zionists is very much connected to its misrepresentation of Jewish safety as being found in a colonial state. And not only in practical terms, of course, as we just saw, there is no safety when you dominate and colonize another people. Jabotinsky, one of the founding fathers of Israel, said at the time, and he was actually speaking to labor Zionists who were considered more liberal in their orientation. He actually said, if you think you can colonize another people and that they won't resist, you are not following the lessons of history. The only way we will not only colonize, but maintain our colonization of Palestine is through a very strong and ongoing military presence and military assault. And so not only in literal practical terms is Israel unsafe for everyone living in that region, including the Jewish people living there, but Israel itself, as Hajo spoke, has an actual disregard for the experience of Jewish unsafety and also mobilizes anti-Semitism in order to justify itself. And it's not the topic of this, but for IJAN, for the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, we understand Zionism as itself being extremely anti-Semitic. And Hajo spoke to the concrete ways of that. But in addition, Zionism has never been safe for Jewish people. And there's a long history of Zionist collaboration with anti-Semites, from Balfour, who was looking to rid the UK and Europe of Jewish people, to breaking the Nazi boycott and other forms of collaboration in exchange for resources for Israel or getting Zionist leadership out. But today, their collaboration with Christian Zionists. And so it is a total myth. And that is also for us, we are in joint struggle. Of course, we're in solidarity with Palestinians. But as Jamal Juma said to us, who is someone who was organized in Palestine and is there now and was one of the founders of the boycott, divestment, sanctions call from Palestine, said to us when we were building IJAN, sure, Jewish solidarity is important, but we don't need you for our resistance. We have our own resistance. We need anti-Zionists as part of a broader fight against racism and fascism. And capitalism and global imperialism. And that's because you have your own history of being internally colonized. Whether you're from Europe, that's an experience of internal colonization, or you're from the region and you've experienced colonization with your fellow colonial, with your fellow residents, because you've been under British colonialism, European colonialism. So we have our own reasons for fighting against this weaponization. And of course, we do that as part of our collective struggle with Palestinians and others. But I also just want to talk about the importance of combating it and how we do that. And just to say that Israel plays a role, does a job for the United States and Europe that Jewish people have done throughout history before the state of Israel. And as an oppressed people, like many oppressed people, we have a choice. First, we try, everyone tries to survive, which is a form of resistance. But then you have a choice. You either organize against or you collude. And at every moment in history, we have that choice, even as people who are oppressed. And so now we have a choice again. Are you with the people who are experiencing genocide and racism against fascism, or are you going to collude with it? And Israel is a nation-state expression of the way Jewish people colluded with czars at times, colluded with the Nazis during it and after it, and during it, and now colludes with people who use Jewish safety for another agenda, but really have no investment in combating anti-Semitism. They just use it. And so that's part of our fight. We are making a choice to not allow that history to be used. And we have to make that choice publicly, constantly, and use our history in solidarity with Palestine, which is what everyone on this webinar does that has brought us to this point. So I'll pause there. And this tour was part of that intervention.
Okay, thank you, Sara. Very illuminating indeed. I think we should move now to our commenters because we are running out of time. So I would like to call to Kali Akuno from Cooperation Jackson to jump in. Kali Akuno, we met in Argentina a few years ago. It will be nice to see you again. Could you give us your comments on what we have been discussing till now?
Yeah, good to be with everybody, and appreciate everybody who's tuning in and building and connecting with us. In the short time that we have left, I saw that there was a question about the ICJ opinion that I wanted to really just touch on. I think we can speak plainly and honestly in that what many of us were hoping for in terms of a ceasefire, the ICJ did not deliver that very clearly and explicitly. They stopped short of that. And from what I understand, there was a lot of political jostling behind the scenes amongst the members of the court, and that they wanted to try to have a near unanimous verdict for whatever they put out. And they wind up having 2 object on the first issue and 1 on the second. So it was near unanimous. And I think they wanted to send a clear political message, both to the state of Israel and also to the United States, which was clearly present in all aspects of the deliberations of this particular judgment. Send a clear message that they too need to be held accountable for the crimes that they are committing. So I think we need to recognize it for what it is, and that it is historic or was historic for charging or taking up the case of charging Israel with genocide and holding other parties accountable as in assisting with that. And I think just from a movement perspective, a social movement perspective, it is something that we are going to have to build upon. And I think, the tools that we have available to us through the BDS campaign offer, I think, the basis by which we need to strengthen our overall pushback in this particular point in time. But I think there are a couple of things that I want to really interject that I think we need to do, because many folks have been wondering, where are, in particular, the so-called Arab states and the Islamic states, where and why aren't they doing more to stop this genocide and ethnic cleansing? And I think we have to remember how many of those states are really puppet regimes of the United States. And that it is also, I think, incumbent upon us to try to help uplift the social movements in the respective Arab and Islamic countries that are seeking to provide some form of direct resistance to this genocide, but also to improve and strengthen the hand of the social movements for their own struggle for democratic rights and economic rights within their own countries. So there's kind of two dimensions that we need to do, I think, on our end of applying pressure to the various states for them to kind of get their butts in motion to make a greater impact. And our movements have a role in doing that and demanding more of them and not just letting them stand alone. I think that's a critical piece that we need to see. And an aspect of how this plays out, I think, to connect this and then in the interest of time, move on to others. I want to highlight Namibia's protests to Germany saying that it was going to come to the aid of Israel and calling attention to the hypocrisy of the German government in denying its genocide of folks in Namibia, particularly the Herero people, and saying that they never acknowledge their actions there, which is sometimes noted as the first genocide that Germany committed, and that they have no standing in being able to determine what genocide is or isn't relative to the issue what's going on with the Palestinian people. But what I want to highlight is that this part of why the Namibian government is even taking that stance is because of direct applied pressure that a lot of social movement actors on the continent and beyond put on the government to speak up and to renegotiate its own terms of reparations and compensation from the German government and to not sell themselves short. So there's a lot at play in terms of us seeing our struggles as interlinked because they are, us uplifting our shared history, our collective struggle, and building upon that to change the present and to end this genocide. So I'll end there so we have some time for other speakers.
Thank you so much, Kali. I know there's a whole lot for all of us to say, and we called this webinar for about an hour and a half. So we're going to move it right along. I'm very excited to introduce Maria LaHood, who is a lawyer with the Center for Constitutional Rights, who is also working on the case that we spoke about earlier in the Palestine versus Biden case. Thank you so much for joining us, Maria.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here with you all, and I'm honored to be one of the lawyers representing Monadel and our other Palestinian clients who sued Biden, Blinken, and Austin for aiding and abetting Israel's genocide and for failing to prevent it and seeking to stop U.S. support for it. As Monadel said, our clients and genocide expert testified yesterday in what was a historic hearing where they were heard by the judge and seen in a U.S. courtroom regarding Israel's utter devastation of Gaza and U.S. complicity and the dehumanization of Palestinians by Israel and by the United States. The link is in the chat if folks want. It's long. It was a 4.5-hour hearing, but if you really, want to look at anything, it would be our client's testimony, which was just really devastating. And the judge felt it. And hopefully, we don't know what'll happen at the U.S. court, but we are hopeful that he will do the right thing. But if he doesn't, we are, we really feel like yesterday was a victory in itself. That case was brought under international law that's codified in the Geneva Convention. And just, the Geneva Convention was adopted in 1948 in the aftermath of the horrors of the Holocaust in order to prevent other genocides. It is the international codification of never again for anyone. There was a question in the chat about whether the ICJ ruling, clearly calls for a ceasefire. I don't know if someone else wanted to answer this, but the ICJ ruling is enforcing the Genocide Convention, and the ICJ found a plausible case that Israel's committing genocide in Gaza and that it must stop committing genocidal acts. And it also must enable the provision of basic services and humanitarian assistance. So although it didn't explicitly order Israel to stop military operations, which was a disappointment, Israel effectively has to do that in order to comply with the order. Just looking at, the use of law and the pressure we need to be building to build power, it has been a decades-long campaigns by Israel and the US to ensure impunity for their international law crimes and to pervert international law away from protecting people and, toward protecting state power. And at the same time, they've had a global campaign to suppress criticism of Israel by trying to equate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, by trying to equate advocacy for Palestinian liberation with terrorism. And US state power and institutional power has been adopting that. So I think there are levers at every level in the United States and elsewhere to, put pressure on our government actors and local, state, federal, to not only try to stop the genocide, but to ensure that people are free to demand liberation and liberation for Palestinians, liberation for all peoples. And that is a form of resistance, just doing everything we can to speak up, to speak out, and engage in BDS and change the narrative and bring, Palestinian voices to the forefront and their demands for liberation. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Maria. We are grateful for your work. I want to bring in our last commenter today before we go into just a little bit more time for discussion. And before I do that, I want to invite folks to send questions into the Q&A. You've been doing a great job so far, and many of our panelists have been integrating your questions into their responses already. So we will try to get to some more and continue to integrate, but I want to introduce and invite Sam Weinstein, who's a member of the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network from the UK. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be on this webinar, and I sit in, of course, the UK, where British imperialism probably has one of the greatest histories of genocide of any country, beginning, of course, with the slave trade and slavery itself all over the world. I wanted to mention a couple of particular cases of that. One, of course, is Native Americans when they colonized the United States and Canada. Native Americans were on the sharp end of the sword. And if I can just quote from some of the activists now who are saying Palestinians resist the same colonial system that Native people have been resisting for hundreds of years in the United States. The relationship between the United States and Israel is so intertwined that the colonial tactics in both countries must be understood as a parallel, if not a mirror of each other. And I think none of us would have a problem in agreeing with that. I also wanted to mention Australia, because yesterday was Australia Day, where they were supposed to be celebrating the wonders of Australia. And in fact, what happened was there were a whole series of protest marches where they compared what happened to Native Australians, to Aborigines, to exactly what is happening in Palestine. And also in Ireland, where Genocide Joe always reminds us that he is from, right? What they are saying, Bernadette McAllister, who has always been a famous fighter for everybody's rights, said, "No shamrock for Genocide Joe," which means that they don't want people to go there on the 17th. They don't want anybody in Ireland to go to the United States to celebrate St. Patrick's Day in the US. I also want to mention one other case because I think it's really important. People don't know about it. But in India, the British government basically starved to death 4 million Bengalis during the Second World War. Now, what's been happening in the UK is it has been the most massive movement in support of Palestinians most massive movement that we have seen since the invasion of Iraq. One march was more than 800,000, and there was a Jewish bloc which contained many thousands of all the different Jewish groups opposed to the slaughter that is going on in Gaza. And in terms of that, I want to also point out the picket, and you can see behind me, hopefully, the picket that we held yesterday, and I'll get briefly out of the way, just so you can see the whole picture. And just to say, IJAN UK holds a picket every Friday in front of the house of Ambassador Hotoveli, who is the I shouldn't say Jewish, who is the Israeli ambassador, and has said that 600,000 casualties, deaths of civilians in Gaza is acceptable. And of course, we all know that is genocide. But she said a lot of other things, including opposing a Palestinian state in any form. Her solution is a no-state solution, no state for Palestinians of any variety, and called Palestinians thieves of history. And I could go on for a while about all the different things that she has said. But I do want to say that picket, we always report on what's going on all over the world. And we have taken great heart, particularly from the fact that in the United States, a new generation of Jews is dumping Zionism and really has come out opposed. You all have surrounded the White House, shut down bridges, shut down tunnels, shut down freeways, chased Zim ships away. And I know IJAN has been part of invading the state capitol in California. And these have given us great courage, and we have been able to spread it around. And what we always say on the picket is, we are part of the tradition of Marak Edelman, who was one of the leaders of the Warsaw Ghetto, that to be a Jew is to be on the side of the oppressed, never on the side of the oppressor. And I want to re-emphasize what Sara said earlier, that Palestinians have a right to resist. We always say this on the picket, and we have a right to support their resistance. I want to make one last point, because Monadel both come from the working class movement, from trade unions. And we in the trade unions have a special responsibility in relation to the Zionists and to Israel, because the state of Israel was founded by trade unionists. And they were always anti-working class. They were always scabs. And part of what they did was to break the longest general strike in history of Palestinians in 1936. The Zionists helped break that strike, which led to a general resistance. And then the British, showing the way, bombed Palestinians and killed some 20,000. But on top of that, we always have to remember that the Histadrut, that union, that Israeli union which formed the state, was part of the Havara agreement, which basically made an agreement to break a international Jewish boycott, but also to take money from rich Jews and middle-class Jews and get them to Palestine, leaving working-class Jews to suffer the concentration camps. And they must always live with that history. And what we say is, Histadrut must be kicked out of every international labor organization. And we stand by that. There are a whole series of things that they should be kicked out, but boycott divestment, and sanctions. And part of that is boycott the labor movement in Palestine and solidarity.
Thank you so much, Sam. International solidarity is part of the purpose of this event. I want to invite all of our panelists and all of our speakers to turn video on for the last few minutes. I know that we told everyone that we were going to be ending this event in whatever your time zone is about 3 minutes from now. We may go over by a minute or two. Again, we've been receiving your questions in our feed over here, and many of our panelists have been integrating the responses, and we may have time for a little bit more, but I really wanted to make sure to go back and invite Phethani in particular to make any additional comments, because we had some connectivity issues earlier. And it's so great to see all your faces as you're popping up here. So thank you, Phethani.
Thanks, Jis. Thank you. I hope my internet is strong enough now to make my submissions. And I think for us in South Africa, given the history of our struggle against apartheid and colonialism itself, especially settler colonialism, and the solidarity that we received from the international community at the time. I mean, countries whom were not morally obliged to even be on our side at the time, and who could have lost much more by being in solidarity with us. So it is out of that moral compass that we emerge from as a country, that wherever there's injustice, we must find ourselves within the side of the oppressed. And that is what informs our position when it comes to Israel. And importantly, the ICJ ruling yesterday has reaffirmed that the state of Israel itself, I mean, disappointingly, it did not order for a ceasefire, but that is a struggle that we can push for or fight for, as we have been doing since October 7th, all across the world, where there's been mass demonstrations, mass boycotts across the globe to denounce Israeli products. So what we can do in terms of intensifying or putting the political pressure with the ICJ ruling, although it might not respond to all the political questions that we that we have, what we can do to supplement the judgment is to continue to intensify our struggle and also our rejection of the settler colonial state of Israel. And importantly, remembering that the struggle that we're fighting is universal and does not only end in Palestine and Gaza, but also it extends to currently the autocracies which are being committed in Sudan, for example. That as people who have chosen this path of social justice and in defense of human rights, it is important for us to remember that. So our struggle against apartheid served as a basis of informing that, but also importantly to understand the pushback of the application to the ICJ actually from the Jewish community in South Africa, especially the pro-Israeli ones, pro-Palestine, pro-Israeli ones. As I was saying earlier, that the establishment of the state of Israel today was also endorsed by our then Prime Minister, Jan Smuts, at the time of the establishment of apartheid in South Africa. So there's serious ties and roots of apartheid Israel and also the Jewish community in South Africa who support Zionism. So there's been a lot of pushback around the decision of the state of South Africa to oppose the genocidal acts of Israel. But up and beyond, I think it is important for us as people who are pushing for importance of solidarity all across the world to emphasize on the importance of solidarity between the Black oppressed masses and the Palestinian people, because our struggles have much more in common rather than the legal challenges or issues that might be not of uniting us, but there's more which can unite us rather than what can divide us. Thank you, Jis.
Thank you so much, Phethani. We are out of time. I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who's joined us as panelists, and a huge thank you for the more than 150 people who've joined us as audience in webinar. I do want to invite a brief last word if Monadel would like to contribute something. But before we do that, I just want to let you know, because the question did come in the chat, this webinar is being recorded and it will be shared. We don't know exactly what day it's going to be shared on, but we will certainly blast it out. And please follow us on our the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network's socials, which you can find at Jewish Anti-Zionist Network. You'll see a slide in a moment for that. But I wanted to invite Monadel to give any last words.
Thank you, and I appreciate all people who have shared with us their thoughts and their analysis. I thought we are all in the same boat, knowing the fact that this is what we are living through right now is indeed a defining moment of history. And I truly believe that we are only can create a new world by continue to organize, continue to build upon this movement. And if, this is a moment, if we have witnessed the court or the legal fight yesterday, whether from ICJ or the federal court yesterday, it only indicates that we are working on one component of our work, which is the legal component, which is saying that we are searching for every possible way we can to build a new world. And we have to continue organizing. We have to continue to build together, build the world that we want our children and grandchildren to live in peace, away from exploitation, colonialism, and all this that we are going through at this point. We should not rely on current establishments, because all these current establishments, including the United Nations and their structure and their dynamics, we need to change a new world by us. This is not going to be given to us, but we have to change it ourselves. If Gaza is becoming a title for us, or like something that we have to stand, it makes us stand up together, just like we stood up against the apartheid of South Africa in the 80s. This is the time that that Gaza should unite us against all this injustice, all this genocide. May I just remind you that this is the urgency of our organizing, for the fact that when we talk about, when we hear in the news that, 2 days ago, we have like 200 people killed in Palestine, which means in the last 24 hours, they claim, which means that's only the reported number, which indicates that it is for every hour, there's about 8 to 9 innocent people being killed as we speak, which means in the last 2 hours, there have been 18 people being killed, most of whom are children. We have a responsibility to end this madness. We have a responsibility to make history. We have to responsibility to stand with what we represent and what we stand for, justice. Thank you so much for your program today.
Thank you so much for those last words, Monadel. We really want to thank everyone for joining us, both our panelists and also all our attendees. I want to give, I'm going to read some names real fast. We want to thank Monadel, who was just speaking, Phethani Madzivhandila, Sara Kershnar, Kali Akuno, Maria LaHood, Sam Weinstein, Noah Sochet, who's been doing tech support on the back end for IJAN, Eugenia Pugliese, who's been doing translation along with Isabel Galban, and Mariana from IJAN, who's also been helping out on the back end. There's been a lot of work going into all of this, and it is part of the fight that we need to continue to end this genocide and to end the occupation. I want to invite folks to follow the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network on social media. For Instagram, that's at Jewish Anti-Zionist Network. Also check out IJAN, IJAN.org. And again, the video recording of this panel, which is in both English and in Spanish, will be made available sometime soon. Once we'll get to it as soon as possible. I want to thank all of you so much for joining us in our fight for a free Palestine.